prova, prova. Sì, sì. Presidente, buongiorno a tutti, benvenuti. It's a privilege to welcome you this morning to the auditorium of the Istituto Superiore di Sanità, and most especially to welcome you, Professor Leptin. Your presence here is both an honor and an opportunity. An honor because the European Research Council represents Europe's highest ambition for scientific excellence, and an opportunity because it invites us to reflect together on how our institution can strengthen a European ecosystem in which frontier research and public health advance hand in hand. Allow me, therefore, to offer a brief portrait of the Istituto Superiore di Sanità, what we are, what we do, and why this dialogue matters. The ISS is Italy Hub for Research, Control, and Technical Scientific Advice in Public Health. We serve as the technical and scientific body of the Italian National Health Service, working alongside the Ministry of Health, the regions, and the wider system to help guide decisions through evidence. Our responsibilities are integrated by design: research and laboratory work, surveillance, regulation and control, prevention, preparedness, communication and training, so that science can move beyond the laboratory and into real-world protection of the population health and well-being. In many ways, the ISS can be described as a bridge between scientific research and public health, between what can be discovered and what must be delivered. That bridge is built by people, around 1,800 colleagues, researchers, technicians, and administrative staff working every day with a single objective: safeguarding and improving the health of citizens. Our research spans a wide range of disciplines and methods, from fundamental mechanisms to translational pathways and real-world implementation, reflecting the breadth of public health itself and the standards of excellence that we uphold. Interdisciplinarity is not a slogan for us. It is a working method. As Rita Levi-Montalcini remarked in her Nobel Banquet speech, Stanley's exceptional talent and most rigorous training in biochemistry and my own training in neurology provide us with an ideal complementary background, a concise reminder that breakthrough science often emerge where disciplines meet and reinforce one another. This capacity to span discovery and delivery is rooted in our history. The ISS was founded in 1934, originally as the Istituto di Sanità Pubblica, at a time when malaria was still a devastating national challenge. As we approach our centenary, we carry not only an institutional legacy, but a scientific one. Over time, the ISS hosted the work of 4 Nobel laureates: Enrico Fermi, Rita Levi-Montalcini, Ernst Borichain, and Daniel Beauvais, an enduring testament to our tradition of excellence. In an institute like ours, where applied responsibilities are inseparable from research, I'm particularly happy to welcome Professor Maria Leptin. We are honored by your presence in our auditorium, and we look forward to learning from your vision and strengthening our contribution to European research excellence in the years ahead. In a moment, Professor Leptin will deliver her keynote speech and provide insights into the European Research Council's perspective and priorities. Insight we look forward to hearing and discussing with our scientific leadership and the research community gathered here today. However, before this, it is my pleasure to hand over the floor to Dr. Luisa Minghetti, my delegate for research and director of the Research Coordination and Promotion Service at ISS, who will provide some further insights into research activity at the Istituto Superiore di Sanità. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bellantone, for this opportunity. It's really an honor to introduce Professor Maria Leptin. Before doing that, I will just spend a few minutes to give you some more information about, some more detail about the research at ISS, particularly in the context of European funding program. Okay, I just recall what the Professor Bellantone has just said. The research is a constant commitment for ISS. It's through research that we are able to conduct, to run all the other activity in our mission. And the research is organized in 7 major, very broad strategic areas, spanning basically over all the domain in public health. And in this slide, you can see some of the keywords representing what has already been mentioned in terms of multidisciplinarity of the research in ISS. And I think this is one of the unique characteristics of our institute, is the plurality of competence, skill, and expertise in different domains. And this allows us to run research, to carry out research with a One Health integrated vision in which environmental, animal, and human health are really part of the same ecosystem, and as such, we have to approach it. The ISS strategy and the governance is aligned with the European Union health priorities, and ISS actively contributed to, even in the role of coordinator in several actions promoted by the European Union. Just to mention few, just the joint action funded under the program of EU for Health, and all the projects under the run under the program of Horizon Europe, but also with the participation of the experts of ISS in several working groups established by the European Commission. Our research is carried out essentially on external funding that our researchers obtain through competitive call, and the European program are the major source for our research support. And this is just a very quick overview of the participation of ISS in EU program. And as you can see, we participate to many programs. Obviously, the 2 major ones are EU for Health and Horizon Europe. We have a very important participation in several initiatives under the umbrella of EU for Health. This is the present picture of our participation. We have 36 projects. We are part of a large number of joint action, some of which as a coordinator. But Horizon Europe remains the program in which we are more present and we get more funding. I just want to mention that we participate to 7 partnerships, let's say almost all the partnership in health. And we also, as you can see, we are in several other projects, missions like cancer, on climate, and other. This is just a picture just to show the keyword, the major keyword describing our participation in Horizon Europe. And we have a keyword that is just what the program, the platform of Horizon Europe provide for a single institution. And you can see that there are some keywords that really emerge, like preparedness, emerging epidemics, but then we have clinical trial, fight against pollution, and so on. And that is a clear picture of our multidisciplinarity and the variety of themes that are addressed in our institute. Few more detail on our participation in Horizon Europe. We are present in the Pillar 1 this is a very, very recent picture of our participation. So there are several projects. They are right now in the phase of grant agreement preparation. We have 2 projects in the Marie Curie program, and we have 4 projects dedicated to infrastructure. And I like to to stress at this point, because research infrastructure, according to the ESFRI roadmap, are a very important instrument to promote research and to promote excellence. And ISS is deeply involved in research infrastructure. We are representing entity on the joint mandate of the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of University and Education, of 3 important infrastructure for the biomedical research, like BBM-RAI, that is the infrastructure for the biobanks. EATRIS is the infrastructure dedicated to translation medicine, and the CRAN, that is the one dedicated to clinical research. And we are the representing entity, but we are also the national node for EATRIS and CRAN. Pillar 2 is, of course, very important for us. We have 26 projects in the cluster health, and including the 6 partnership. But we have projects also in other clusters, like the civil security and society, climate, energy, and mobility, cluster food, bioeconomy, natural resource, and so on. There are other specific programs in which we are involved, including the Euratom, the partnership dedicated to radio protection. And the last one is dedicated to antimicrobial resistance. So this is my last slide, just to give the flavor of what we do in Europe. But I would like to conclude by saying that, as Professor Bellantone pointed out just a few minutes earlier, in an institute like ours, where applied responsibility and research are really inseparable because they are part of our work, of our mission, we are often led toward applied research, but we strongly believe that fundamental research is the one that ultimately generate innovation and major breakthrough. Therefore, we look with great interest to the European Research Council. That is the most important funding for fundamental research in Europe. And we are deeply grateful to Professor Leptin for her leadership in the Council and for her determination in defending the funding of ERC under the new framework. So without any further ado, let me introduce Professor Leptin. She is president of the European Research Council since November 2021, and she is chair of the ERC governing body, the Scientific Council. Before this appointment as ERC president, she was director of the European Molecular Biology Organization in Heidelberg, which is another very important and prestigious organization that promotes excellence in life science in Europe. Professor Leptin is a developmental biologist and a geneticist, best known for her work in the mechanisms that allow a developing body to take on its correct shape. And after her studies in mathematics and biology at the University of Bonn and Heidelberg, she carried out her PhD research in Basel Institute of Immunology. Then she moved to the Laboratory of Molecular Biology in Cambridge, and she became group leader at the Max Planck Institute of Developmental Biology in Tübingen, and then professor Institute of Genetics in Cologne. She also spent several sabbatical periods in different universities, including the University of California and l'École Normale Supérieure in Paris and the Wellcome Trust Sanger Institute. And of course, she is elected member of numerous scientific academies and honorary fellow of the Academy of Medical Science. She is a foreign member of the Royal Society and the international member of the US National Academy of Science. So thank you very much for being with us, and the floor is yours.
I think I'll speak from here, if you don't mind. Can you hear me? Because I know I'm in the right place for health issues, but I also know that none of you can do anything about the common flu virus. So, hope in vain. President Bellantone, Professor Minghetti, former ERC Council member Barbara Ensuli, Excellencies, and colleagues and friends. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always the best part of my work as an ERC president to talk to the community that we, the ERC, are supposed to serve. So we're talking today about investing in knowledge to protect lives. I think we all understand that protecting lives is not only about responding well when a crisis arrives. It's not only about hospitals and vaccines, etc., although, of course, it is about hospitals and vaccines and diagnostics and surveillance and emergency measures. It's also what was done 10, 20, 30 years ago. So an emergency now depends on the knowledge that we generated in the past. It's about whether someone had the freedom to ask a difficult question before its usefulness was obvious. It's about whether a research system had the patience to support work that looked obscure at the time. It's about whether institutions had the confidence to invest in knowledge before there was a clear project or a market or a political demand or anything that's called impact now. And that's the case I really want to make today, and I always make. Frontier research, which is what the ERC funds, is not a luxury. It's not something we support after the practical work has been funded. It's one of the conditions that makes the practical work possible. And in health, probably more than anywhere else, we know this. The road from discovery to patient benefit is long and indirect and often quite strange. It rarely moves in a straight line from problem to solution or from bench to bedside. It involves detours and failures and ideas that looked abstract long before becoming essential. I don't have to explain the examples to you. You know them. mRNA vaccines, really was based on work that was, some of it was done a long time ago, Katalin Karikó's work, and some of it was done for a different purpose, Ugo Shahin's work, who, by the way, was funded by the ERC. Monoclonal antibodies, I myself worked on them. At the time, and the LMB in Cambridge made the mistake of not recognizing it, they were not thought to be useful. Look what they do now. CRISPR, now it's used for really gene therapy, for making people see again, for retinal curing. That began with understanding bacterial immunity and yogurt. So you know these examples. But they must be repeated time and again because we often forget their lesson. We celebrate the breakthrough when it arrives. We're less good at remembering the conditions that initially made it possible. And one of these conditions is time. This is not an easy message in politics. Political cycles are short. Politicians want to be re-elected, and that happens soon. That does not happen in 20 years. And budgets are negotiated under pressure. Ministries have to show results. Public funders are asked reasonably what taxpayers are getting for their money. That's much easier to explain for a bridge than for a fundamental scientific project. And in health, of course, the pressure is even stronger because the needs are so immediate. There are patients waiting and health systems are under strain. So I understand very well why governments want research to be useful. Of course, I want research to be useful as well, although I was just citing the case of research that is not useful at all, but that the population likes. I cited here the Italian example of Ercolano and Pompeii, where such beautiful research is done, and it ends up on the front page of big international newspapers. Totally useless, but the population loves, actually, the fulfillment of curiosity. They want to learn about these things. Anyway, back to the practical stuff of health. I said I want research to be useful too, where it makes sense. But it's not the question whether research should have an impact. The question is, how does impact actually happen? If we demand that every project explain its immediate impact too early and too narrowly, we may make science look more accountable, but we will make it less capable of producing the discoveries we need. We also risk promising more than we can keep, and that's a real danger. But conversely, we will reward safe language, we will favor the questions that already fit existing categories, and will miss the ideas that do not yet have a name and a purpose. That would be a mistake for science, and it would also be a mistake for public health, of course. Europe often talks about competitiveness, sovereignty, and resilience. These are important words, but I have to confess sometimes, especially sitting in Brussels, that we use them a little less and explain them a little more. For me, resilience in science means that when a new disease disappears, I wish, that when a new disease appears, we already have the people who understand viruses, immunity, diagnostics, modeling, and behavior. It means that when antibiotic resistance grows, we have the microbiologists and the chemists and the clinicians and the evolutionary biologists and the data scientists who have been working on the problem for years. It means that when climate change affects health, we can connect environmental science, epidemiology, social science, medicine, and public policy. So resilience is not built in the moment of an emergency. It is built before the emergency, and often very quietly. So as the president of the ERC, you will not be surprised that I believe strongly in frontier research. But I do not want to present the ERC as a magic solution. Europe needs many kinds of research funding: strong national systems, stable institutions, clinical research, public health research, etc., etc. The ERC has a special role, a specific role, I should not call it special, a specific role within this wider system. It funds individual researchers to pursue ambitious ideas at the frontiers of knowledge. It does not define thematic priorities. It does not ask applicants to fit into a political program. It asks simpler and more demanding questions. Is this an excellent researcher with a groundbreaking idea? I won't, in this speech, deal with specific things. I'll leave that for questions and answers. This simplicity is important because it gives researchers time to think, and it gives them time, and it gives them independence. Very important. We're also open to all fields. Like I say, art history is one of them. And that matters too. For health research, this comes not only from medicine, it comes from biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, computer science, engineering, etc., etc. Diagnostic tools might depend on physics. So a better public health intervention may depend on behavioral science as well. So the social sciences and humanities are very important, also in terms of trust, communication, and social context. If we care about health, we must care about the full breadth of knowledge. So I'll say a little bit about what the ERC offers. The ERC grants support researchers at different stages, those establishing their independence, so right after postdoc, or in mathematics and computer science, often right after the PhD. It supports those consolidating their teams and also established leaders. It also supports groups of researchers tackling problems that no single one could tackle themselves. And finally, we have proof of concept grants for people who've made a discovery that they think is applicable in the market, and we help them to realize that. Sorry, getting my pages confused. There. And in the new work program, the 2026 work program, we've also introduced the ERC Plus grant under the Choose Europe initiative from President von der Leyen, and actually with extra money that President von der Leyen gave the ERC for this purpose. This is intended for outstanding researchers with a really big vision to transform a field or to open a new field. It's an important signal. Europe wants to be a place where the most ambitious researchers can do work at real scale. For potential applicants, and I'm happy to go into this in more depth in questions and answers, I would give simple advice. Do not try to guess what Europe wants to hear. That can't be original, because by the time politicians have recognized something, we, the scientists, are already beyond that stage. And don't decorate a conventional project with fashionable words. The panels can immediately see through that. Don't write a proposal that sounds strategic, but is scientifically not bold, is timid. And above all, don't employ agencies to help you. So the ERC is looking for intellectual ambition, clarity, rigor, and independence. The proposal has to be well prepared, and I can say more about that later as well. But at the center, there must be a real new scientific idea. Without that, the project won't fly. And for the deans and directors and institutional leaders, and I know some of them are here, I would say this. The ERC success is not only an individual matter, it depends on the environment around the application. The support, and once again for the younger ones, the absolute independence from senior people and the time to do their research. Researchers need time to write properly. They need colleagues who will read critically. They need administrative support to fill in the forms, and an administration that understands the rules without taking over the science. They need an institutional culture that respects ambition and independence. And that's why I welcome the Italian government's new 3-year research plan. I don't comment on national policy, that's not my role. But the broad direction is encouraging: a multi-year framework, more predictable timing of calls and evaluation, and support for basic and applied research are all important. And at the European level, we need the same seriousness. The next EU budget, from 2028 to 2034, will be one of the most important decisions for Europe's scientific future. It will determine whether Europe is serious about the ambitions it has set for itself. Better health, tech leadership, preparedness, competitiveness, security, and a stronger place in the world. These goals cannot be achieved with words alone. They require a stronger framework program and a stronger ERC. The ERC is already one of Europe's clearest successes, and of course I can't take any credit for that. It's the founding fathers and mothers who are responsible for that, who set it on the right track. It's recognized around the world. It attracts and retains outstanding researchers. But it's also heavily oversubscribed. Every year, excellent proposals cannot be funded. Out of the proposals that are ranked as A by the panels, A meaning must be funded, we can actually pay for only 60% of them. So 40% of proposals go unfunded, even though they should be funded every year. So we need Italy's support for an ambitious new framework and for a significantly higher ERC budget in the next EU budget. And I'm very glad that Minister Bernini, with whom I talked an hour ago, fully supports that. And I know the academies and the research organizations do too. But we have to say it with a very loud voice, and it has to reach the very top of government. So I worry when research policy becomes impatient. Impatience can, of course, trigger activity. That's good. And it can produce initiatives, calls, and platforms and strategies. And some of them are useful. But impatience does not produce discovery. Discovery needs patience. It also needs discipline, but it needs freedom. It needs accountability, but not constant top-down steering. It needs evaluation, of course. It needs peer review, but not evaluation that becomes a substitute for sound judgment. The ERC model is built on peer review. I know peer review is not perfect. Panels work hard, but they are persons, they're not robots, so they have personal views, and they often have to make very difficult decisions under pressure. Excellent proposals, sometimes, as I mentioned, cannot be funded because the budget isn't large enough, and we are doing everything to improve our processes, and again, I'm happy to take questions about that. But the central principle is clear. Scientific quality should be judged by people who understand the science, and funding decisions should be protected from short-term political fashion. Okay, there. So, nobody can tell anyone exactly which discoveries that we're making today will protect lives in 20 years, just as we didn't know which of the discoveries 20 years ago are helping us now. We can certainly identify important problems, and your overview there had a bunch of very important problems on it, but we can't plan discovery. That's not a weakness, and that is something really many citizens and our politicians don't understand. It's the nature of research. Research is not a pipeline. I mean, we need the pipeline where we have fundamental knowledge that brings innovation and applications out at the end, but we don't know what to stick in the pipeline today. So we have to create a huge pool of knowledge, and maybe someone will dip a pipe into that pool only in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time. The pool has to be there. So the task of policy is not to eliminate uncertainty, it's to build systems that can make good use of uncertainty. We should invest steadily and not only dramatically and briefly to make us look good. Crisis funding is necessary, it has its place, but it can't replace the slow accumulation, the patient accumulation of expertise. Let me end with the applications, with the potential applicants in this room who might be thinking of applying. The ERC is demanding, and it should be. The competition is hard, and certainly not everyone will succeed the first time. As you heard, not even all the A-ranked proposals succeed. But applying can still be worthwhile if the idea is ready. It forces clarity, it makes people think. I've talked to some who've applied 7 times, and they said they enjoyed writing every one of the 7 times. Eventually they got it. It needs patience, and applying can be worthwhile. And, you know, just having to explain your question focuses your own research and sharpens your own research. And of course, when it works, it's a change in career. The institutional leaders, again, I have to say, and I've talked also to rectors today, the environment is so important. And one really has to create the conditions in which people who can write these things and who have these ideas can thrive. And it's not only the already confident ones, not only those who know how to navigate, but also those who need encouragement and time and serious support. Europe's scientific future will not be shaped only in Brussels. It'll be shaped in places like this, in institutes, universities, hospitals, and labs. It's shaped by the decisions of directors and deans, and in the time and independence given to young researchers, in the trust placed in unusual ideas, and in the willingness to help funding knowledge before it is visibly useful. The ISS was built on the idea that public health needs science, and that idea is as true today as it was in the 1930s. But we must add something more. Public health needs science that is strong enough, broad enough, and free enough to surprise us. If we want to protect lives, we must invest not only in what we already know we need, we must invest in knowledge that will make us ready for what we cannot yet see. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much for you gave us a very clear message, some encouraging, other lot of food for our brain to think about. And I would really like to open the discussion if there are questions from the audience.
I encourage you to ask about anything. I've left out a lot of stuff. I'll be happy to take any questions, technical, philosophical. I don't promise I can answer them, but do ask.
Thank you, first of all, for your encouraging message. And my name is Marco Salvatore. I work in rare disease centers here in this institute. And today is also the Undiagnosed Rare Disease Day. And we know that since many, many years, we are working in this institute on the field of rare disease. And we are very grateful to Europe, both for funding our project, but also for giving us the possibility to be able to give trust to people, and especially to patients, and find out new solution for them. Because you say that when you are in patients, you will not find out simple solution in this. So I think that now we are currently facing a new field, a new, in quite a sense, word to find out, which is the undiagnosed field. And I would kindly ask you a comment on whether to invest in this sector, and if you think that we can, in quite a sense, believe in Europe also for undiagnosed rare diseases, because, you know, we have done a lot for rare diseases, but the undiagnosed is still resembling more than 55-16% of total rare undiagnosed patients suffering for these conditions. Yes. And really agree with Professor Minguet when she said that you give us a fresh breath for this presentation. Thank you.
Well, as you must know yourself, funding for rare diseases is a problem, and even more for undiagnosed rare diseases. And because, you know, the return on investment is minimal, and the responsibility of those who have a lot of money often doesn't lie there. So it's often funded, as you will also know, by philanthropic funders who see a need there. And yes, maybe Europe should invest in that. We, of course, don't make any top-down funding decisions at all. So whoever comes, and I think, but that's nice, because at the ERC, you don't have to have a return on investment. If you discover something new, if it is a new rare disease, you know, whatever you discover, you will probably discover something about interactions between pathogens and people, or about human genetics or human physiology that will have a broad aspect of knowledge. So I think for an ERC grant, that would never, because it's a rare disease or an undiagnosed, you know, diagnosis, the data management of undiagnosed, those are wonderful challenges for grant applications. So that's the good thing about the ERC. If it's an interesting proposal, no matter how rare it is, and you learn something from it, that has a chance. As for the top-down decisions, above my pay grade.
Thank you.
And then...
Thank you very much, Professor Leptin, for your valuable speech. I appreciated very much your words about the role of impatience in generating knowledge, and above all, the doubt that we have to have when we share the knowledge and we can ask for help for agency in research. In my experience, I got some not good results in asking for the help of agency for creating knowledge and proposal for the European projects. It is comfortable and sometimes difficult to make this kind of exchange with the ones who got the knowledge for the process of creating science. I would like to know, I'm a social scientist engaged in chronic pain, psychosocial consequences in the epidemiological field, but I'm eager to know what is your opinion about artificial intelligence applying in the process of creating knowledge, because I feel insecure about this, and I must confess I'm just starting to know the role of AI in generating knowledge, and I got some concern because, in my opinion, artificial intelligence is not controlled in a scientific way under the scientific framework that we are used to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I have to say, if you're uncomfortable with AI, you're not the only one. And in fact, the ones who are most uncomfortable are often the researchers, the experts at the very forefront of AI. So and I'll get to the first part of your question in a moment. So we, of course, are thinking of how we can, how do our researchers, our applicants use AI? How do our reviewers use AI? But also, how can we use AI at the ERC to deal with this amazing increase of numbers of applications? And the answer is, it's not easy, because AI hallucinates, AI is biased because of the material that it's been trained on. So I can't answer you. Feeling uncomfortable, I think, is good, but it's here to stay. It's amazingly useful, and people use it in research all the time. So I think one has to use it and keep one's critical capacities available and alert all the time. About the first half of your question, about support, and that really goes to everyone. I want to give you the example of Czechia, the Czech Republic. They didn't used to do so well in ERC applications. Then people on the ground, former panel members, former current grantees, recognized that that was not a good thing. And they started a grassroots movement, a group, who got together and decided to advise all applicants for ERC grants. And that advice took two forms. If they thought an idea for a project was a good one, they would work with that person to help him or her turn it into a good proposal. But if they didn't think the idea was a good one, or the achievements of the applicant were not sufficient to convince them that these aims could be reached, they said, we won't help you. So it's a bit brutal, but it's needed, because there is no point in making people apply if they're not ready, if their ideas are not ready, and if they don't know how to write a grant. So they did this. They sorted into, you have a chance, you don't have a chance, and then those who had a chance, they really helped them. Right? And this is important because, if you're in Cambridge, UK, or if you're at the LSE or at the Pasteur Institute in Paris or so, you have a round of colleagues who are extremely experienced. Many of them have had grants, and you can talk to them. But in smaller institutions or in more remote places or in the smaller countries, you don't have them. And do you know what the result of this was? So they've been doing this for 2 or 3 years. In last year's, I'll only use that example because that was the most striking. In last year's consolidator grant call, Czechia was the most successful. It had the highest success rate of all countries, above UK, above Germany, above Netherlands. So that works. And it's not only that it works, it's really necessary. You cannot expect somebody to get this all out of themselves. That's what I meant by environment.
Very, very clear, and we will try to learn from Czechia.
Yes, I think because you have the people here.
Barbara,
and we started this type of mechanism many years ago at ERC, and also for Italians, because we had really a low rate of awarding of the grants.
Yeah.
Often Italians were writing a lot of application, but they were not good application, also for the language. And the second point was the institution that was not giving help in budgeting, all administrative issues. And I think we have to work on this a lot. But, the science is there. Yes. And I think we can make it. We need to think about doing this.
Yes.
Concerning AI, actually I wanted to ask you the same thing for AI, because that what puzzled me. For science, deep science, is not as good as you could like AI is. I did several tries, asking questions, which I knew very well, I knew references, papers, everything. I was wrong.
Yeah.
The
No,
answer were
AI,
wrong. So
yes,
cannot,
absolutely.
I mean, it's very useful, but cannot
Yes.
be fully
No.
trusted.
No, you
Absolutely.
can't fully trust it. We all know that. It hallucinates.
Concerning this, when you handle the grants, how much you use AI in terms of judgment or classification of the grants in A and B or whatever?
Zero.
Is any? Zero.
Zero.
Perfect.
We don't use it at all at the moment. We have a project where we will get external help to see what would be possible and what one would have observed. I mean, some institutions, what would be very easy would be to match projects to reviewers. That probably can be done if it's then checked by humans. But for the judgment, hard to know. I mean, some agencies say they've used it and it makes good predictions about the bottom third or so. That's where our own AI grantees, if you ask them, they say, no way should you use that.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get biased decisions or just completely wrong decisions.
Absolutely. Just a curiosity, how much will be the budget for the next period? ERC
You
budget?
tell me. You go to the Prime Minister and the President and tell them what to say in Brussels.
How much are you shooting for?
Yes. Well, we actually have Mario Draghi a lot to thank for, because he said that it should be 200 billion. Now we have 95 billion over 7 years. Draghi said it must be 200 billion over the next framework program. I'm happy to say that I met him before he wrote that and explained why the ERC needed double the funding. And but others have even said more. Manuel Aitor, who's written a report for the Commission,
Yeah.
he said 220. So, the sky is the limit. China is spending a lot more on science, a lot more.
Yeah.
And what have they just said for the next 5 years? 7% increase year on year. So that's going to be 50% over 5 years. It's amazing. So
Yes.
we are pussyfooting around with 200 billion. That's nothing. And we must protect that. So that's partly why I saw also your minister today. She's very supportive, of course, but it needs to be the finance minister and the top of the government. So let's hope the hopeful framework program gets at least 200 billion. And the ERC, the current proposal, but that's not written down, it was one sentence on one slide that we saw, would go to 31.5. We now have 16 billion over 7 years.
Yeah.
So we now have about 2 billion per year. We're hoping that that'll be 4.
Hopefully.
Yes, but then we have to inflation adjust the grants. So it sounds great, but we're already constrained.
Hi, thank you for your talk. My question is quite biased because I work in the core facilities of the ISS, in the genomic core facility, and I wonder whether the collaboration of groups with the core facilities, with cutting-edge technologies, is in some way part of the criteria to evaluate a project. If it gives a plus, and if you think that this could be something to consider.
So it's not, as a criterion, it's not. Of course, if a researcher relies heavily on core facilities, they can put funding for that in, and then it becomes part of the funding. Whether a grant is realistic, if somebody says, I will make 7 mouse models over 5 years, and they don't even have a mouse house, then you begin to scratch your head and say, how are they going to do it? Or, I'm going to do gazillions simulations, and they don't have a good IT department or good servers. So in that sense, it is. But we deliberately do not judge the institutions because it's unfair on those who come from weaker institutions but have very great ideas. So we deliberately say, do not judge the institutions. Of course, the proposal has to be realistic, and of course, core facility can be funded. Something back there.
There's another question in the back.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. I would like to know your opinion. I was reflecting on some words of the title of your presentation, like knowledge, protect lives and future. And we know that many of our diseases are socially determined. I'm talking about the mental health of young people. I'm talking about epigenetic modification. I'm talking about epigenetic inheritance. So actually, there is lots of knowledge that we already have, but there is still lots of difficult in changing politics that determines these lifestyles and education and prevention and health promotion. So I would like to know your opinion in this concern.
Well, I'm not at all an expert in that field, but that's why the ERC funds experts in the social sciences and humanities who look at those problems, you know, acceptance of new knowledge, distribution, application of policies, etc. So I really can't say. That's not my business at all. I recognize how important it is, and I see the failures when it's not properly implemented. But that's for the social scientists to look into, and I'm sure we have projects on that. Because it's so important, I'm sure there are projects. I don't have them at the top of my mind, but I could find them, or I could get staff to find them.
Any more questions? Maybe I have one for you,
Yeah.
if there is, while the colleagues are thinking about question. Going back to all the advice you gave us or to the research who want to apply to RC, if I understand well, there are new rules coming, particularly in terms of the possibility to reapply to ERC. Can you explain us
Yes.
what is the new part of it?
Yes. So basically, this is based on the number of applications we receive. And there are two aspects why we discourage those who didn't get high grades in the first round. We discourage them because we don't want disappointment. That's why I was saying that's what's so important about the Czech example, that they discourage those who weren't ready. It just leads to frustration. So we said, don't come back, think about it for a bit longer. That's one reason. But the other reason is to protect our panels because, you know, we have panels with more than 300 applications. And so we were going to increase. We already have restrictions. So anybody who gets a C judgment in the first step is usually not allowed to apply for the next 2 years, and anyone with a B is banned from the next year. And we'd extended that by 1 year. But the Scientific Council has thought about that again, and we're still in the process of thinking, but we're probably going to publish today our thinking on that. And we recognize that we took researchers too much by surprise. But we will have to restrict in the future. Even if we end up not doing it now, we will have to restrict in the future. That's why it's so important not to apply if you're not. But you know, I have to say again, I don't want to discourage the wrong people. I was at last year at an advisory board meeting at an eminent institute in Paris, and one of the PIs gave a presentation of her work. It was really exciting. And I said, surely you've applied for ERC grant for this. How did it go? And she said, oh, no, I don't apply for the ERC. It's not for people like me. That is nonsense. There is no such person as people like me. It's about, I mean, it's just not that. It's about the idea, and it's about the excellence of the work. And that can be achieved. But it's not always achieved. And people often don't recognize whether they're the right ones or not. And that's why this support structure is so good, because they recognize.
Thank you. And I really would like to thank you for one of your last remark when you suggested that for public health, we not only need good science, but we need freedom.
Yes.
Because I think that is something that the community of ISS really feel. It's very difficult for us always to explain that we need to do fundamental research if we want to
Yes.
provide something useful to our ministry. We are not part of the Ministry of the University of Research, but we are under we are funded by the Ministry of Health
Yes.
that has a different strategy. So for us, it's your speech and your final remark is very encouraging because is what we live every day. I think that my colleague would agree with me. That is something that we really feel that we strongly need to have freedom for doing fundamental research that maybe will be useful in the long term. There's no more question. I don't know if Professor
Don't be
Belantoni want to
shy.
close.
I can't believe there's so many questions I know you were going to ask and didn't
Please,
dare.
Loredana Ingrosso.
Actually, I was shy.
There you go.
Thank you for your presentation. I work the Department of Infectious Disease. I was very interested about what you said about the possibility, the willingness to support brilliant ideas, to support basic research to get where we don't know yet we will be able to reach. But in the other side, I was also concerned when I heard about the need for internal support, not because internal support is not there, but you need bureaucratical support, administrative and structure. And I'm talking just generally, not for my institute. How would you consider it strong ideas that do not have this kind of support you are talking about? Would they be neglected for absence of adequate surrounding environment?
Well, don't get me
Thank
going,
you.
because I have to tell this to the countries that are weaker in obtaining support. There's all sorts. So it has to be so simply for the bureaucratic support, filling in those forms is a pain in the neck, to say the least. And you have to understand the rules. And the ERC is not as bad as some of the other framework programs, where if you make a tiny mistake, you're ineligible. The ERC helps people who make small mistakes. But if big things are wrong, that's going to act against you. And it's not easy to recognize. So the big research institutions have grant offices that understand the rules and that do all that work for their researcher. So the researcher never even has to see the forms. That is, of course, huge help. Small institutions can't afford that, but of course they could gang up together and create a support office. So that's one, that's on the bureaucracy. And then the other is, in some countries, researchers have to spend 80% of their time teaching. You cannot write an ERC grant if you're spending 80% of your time teaching. The people who write ERC grants spend 3 months full-time preparing them. And that your institution has to acknowledge. You can't do all that other stuff that you're supposed to be doing. Others, I hear the seniors discouraging the juniors from applying, because if the junior gets an ERC grant, they're going to ask for more space and more freedom. What kind of attitude is that? So a strong hierarchy with a strong boss is bad news. That's what I mean. And that's not, you can't do anything about that. the entire country structure has to do something about that.
Thank you very much. I also have another thing to ask you. You kind of advised against using agency for the application, but in a way, what happened in Czechia kind of remind me of a support agency toward the application.
No,
it's not.
no, these
Okay.
are experts. These are panel members. They're scientists who know themselves what is needed in the panels, and they're grantees who have succeeded, and so who have somehow they must have something. I'll give you an example why not to use an agency. I talked to someone who is collaborating with an agency for a completely different thing, and the agency said, we help people prepare ERC grants, and we're doing this really well. The people we help achieve a success rate of 13%. I said, what? That's the average. So they achieve exactly zero. Zero. Nothing above. If they'd said 60%, then I would have been impressed. But no, 13%. That is what you get without help from an agency. And the agency only knows how to use buzzwords and how to structure. AI can do that for you. Honestly, I mean, that's a good use of AI. You then have to go through it and make sure that that it didn't hallucinate, that it didn't put in crap references and so on. But agencies are useless.
Thank you. It was just a curiosity.
Yeah.
Thank you for this last comment. I was just looking at our Anna Ceccarelli, the person, the scientific advisor for application, international application, and this is one personal battle that Anna keeps saying, don't use agency, we don't need it, and we are able. So it has been really comforting.
Yes, because especially for Horizon Europe, because they offer support for almost all Horizon Europe calls. They are like let's say a grant office. They not have a specific know-how. They know the templates. They know how to make a very beautiful part B. Maybe also the specific pathway to impact. Okay, fine, but nothing that a grant office or someone that is that has to deal with many different proposals cannot do.
Yeah.
And in the case of, for sure, of ERC grant, I believe that it's better, of course, as you said, to have the support of scientists.
Exactly.
Rather than a technical agency, let's say, which will not really help.
Yeah.
Apart the.
They may. I'm not going to say anything about the other framework programs where there's so many other conditions you have to fulfill, and you probably can't get it right. Which for me means that that's a problem with those programs. That the strings that are attached are more important than the content. But for the ERC, it's the other way around, and the agencies can't do that. Thank you for pointing that out.
I remember many years ago when I came back from the States, there were not many applications from here for European grants. Now they grew up more and more and more. And then we have now a grant office that is working pretty well, very nicely. And I think it would be a big step really to get into the ERC type of bureaucracy, which is simpler than the classical European grant that we know. It's much simpler as compared to those. And enrich us also with that experience, so we are able to help more our people, ISS, to deliver grants, good grants to the ERC. I mean, it's something we should do, I think, President.
Yeah.
And Andrea.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Well, thank you very much, and I think we really thank you, Professor Leptin, for being with us.
Thank you.
And I thank you all for attending this lecture.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
pleasure, pleasure. Good questions.